and Northern Ireland, Uruguay, and Uzbekistan. The request is also supported by the following observer states: Afghanistan, Albania, Algeria, Australia, Azerbaijan, Belgium, Benin, Brazil, Brunei Darussalam, Chad, Chile, Comoros, Croatia, Cyprus, Djibouti, Egypt, Estonia, Finland, Gambia, Georgia, Greece, Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Guyana, Hungary, Iceland, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iraq, Ireland, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kuwait, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lebanon, Liechtenstein, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malaysia, Maldives, Mali, Malta, Montenegro, Morocco, Mozambique, Niger, Nigeria, North Macedonia, Norway, Oman, Portugal, Qatar, Romania, Saudi Arabia, Sierra Leone, Slovakia, Slovenia, Spain, Suriname, Sweden, Switzerland, Syrian Arab Republic, Tajikistan, Tunisia, Turkey, Turkmenistan, Uganda, United Arab Emirates, the United States of America, Yemen, and the State of Palestine. In accordance with Council Resolution 5/1, the Secretariat communicated the request for the holding of a special session to all Member States and made the information available to the specialized agencies, other intergovernmental organizations, and national human rights institutions, as well as to non-government organizations in consultative status with ECOSOC, pursuant to the Council's rules of procedure. The online inscription for the list of speakers was opened on Friday, the 20th of August, and closed at 8 a.m. this morning. The speaking time will be 2 minutes and 30 seconds for Council members and 1 minute and 30 seconds for observer states and other observers. As announced during the open-ended informative consultation held yesterday, on the 19th of August, the Bureau agreed to propose to the Council for its approval a set of extraordinary modalities for this special session, which are very similar to those of our 47th session. They were specified in the minutes of the Bureau meeting. If approved by this Council, they would apply exclusively to this 31st special session, which is held under the ongoing COVID-19 restrictions and should not serve as a precedent. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor at this time on the extraordinary proposed modalities? I see no requests for the floor. Can I take it that the Council agrees that the proposed modalities will be applied during the 31st special session under the current circumstances? I see no objection. It is so decided. At the request of the UNOG Division of Conference Management, I would like to draw your attention to the fact that in order to ensure appropriate sound quality for the benefit of us all, proper equipment and connection must be used. The minimum requirements for remote participants are a USB-connected microphone, headphones, a strong and stable internet connection, and a quiet location. Remote participants who feel that they may have difficulty in meeting these requirements are requested to please contact the Secretariat. Please be advised that where sound quality poses a risk to the interpreters, they will suspend interpretation services. Participants are further reminded that in order to allow for full and accurate interpretation of their statements, they should speak at a reasonable pace. I would also like to take this opportunity to ask for everyone's support to ensure that this special session is carried out in an efficient and dignified manner. I appeal to all delegates to strictly respect the speaking time limits and to adhere to language that is consistent with the dignity that should be inherent to our discussions. I now have the honour to give the floor to Ms. Michelle Bachelet, High Commissioner for Human Rights, to make a statement. Madam High Commissioner, you have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, colleagues and friends, at this critical moment, the people of Afghanistan look to the Human Rights Council to defend and protect their rights. The need to prevent the commission of human rights abuses of even greater magnitude and scope make this an essential meeting. The rapid seizure of much of the country, including the capital, by the Taliban has raised grave fears of a return to past patterns of human rights violations and stoked desperation among many Afghans. In recent weeks, my office has received harrowing and credible reports of the impact on civilians of violations of international humanitarian law, as well as violations and abuses of human rights by the parties to the conflict. UNAMA's Protection of Civilians report from 1st of January to 30th of June this year already indicated an increase in civilian casualties of nearly 50% compared to the same period in 2020. Unquestionably, that toll further increased over the month of July and August. In particular, we have also received credible reports of serious violation of international humanitarian law and human rights abuses taking place in many areas under effective Taliban control. They include, among others, summary executions of civilians and or the combat members of the Afghan National Security Forces, restrictions on the right of women, including the right to move around freely and girls' right to attend school, recruitment of child soldiers, and repression of peaceful protest and expression of dissent. Many people now fear reprisals by the Taliban against those working with the government or the international community, people who have worked to advance human rights and justice, or those whose lifestyles and opinions are simply perceived to be opposed to the Taliban ideology. There are grave fears for women, for journalists, and for the new generation of civil society leaders who have emerged in the past years. Afghanistan's diverse ethnic and religious minorities are also at risk of violence and repression, given previous patterns of serious violations under Taliban rule and reports of killings and targeted attacks in recent months. The harrowing humanitarian situation, aggravated by sustained drought, the COVID-19 pandemic, and significant shortfalls in enabling economic, social, and cultural rights, has further deepened with recent events. A month ago, SRSG Deborah Alliance indicated that 18 million of Afghans were facing a dire humanitarian situation. This was double the number in July 2020, amounting to one-half the people in the country, and it is set to increase. UNHCR has estimated that an additional 270,000 people have been forced to leave their homes and livelihoods since January 2021. Bringing the total displaced population to more than 3.5 million. We can expect that significant numbers of people will seek refuge in neighboring countries or outside the region. The United Nations is committed to stay and deliver aid to those in greatest need, to support efforts to restore peace and stability, and to promote the rights and dignity of all Afghans. With fundamental human rights in the balance, my office will be working urgently to reinstate arrangements for monitoring human rights violations. Madam President, in statement over the recent weeks, the Taliban has pledged to respect and protect human rights. Taliban spokespeople have made specific commitment to respect women's right to work and girls' right to attend school within the Taliban's interpretation of Islamic law. They have also said they will respect the rights of members of ethnic and religious minorities and refrain from reprisals against those who have worked with the government or the international community. The onus is now fully on the Taliban to translate this commitment into reality. In seizing effective control of much of the country, they must ensure in those areas ongoing respect for the international human rights commitments made by the state, as well as ensuring ongoing and indeed heightened provision of essential public services without discrimination to all. International human rights law is immutable. Enjoyment of human rights is not subject to changes in control of territory or de facto authority. Moreover, significant advances in human rights over the past 2 decades have given the people of Afghanistan a strong stake in a society that values and defends human rights. Civil society organizations have flourished across the country. Women have assumed public roles and leadership positions in the media and across society. In 2021, 27% of members of parliament and 1/5 of civil servants were women. Some 3.5 million girls were attending school. compared to 1999, where no girl could attend secondary school and only 9,000 were enrolled in primary education. Human rights defenders have contributed to the economic, political, and social development of their communities across the country. A courageous and independent national human rights institution has played a frontline role. A plurality of voices have been reflected in a flourishing and diverse media. Youth movements across the country have empowered young women and men from diverse ethnic and religious communities. A generation of young people has grown up with hope for a better future and the knowledge of free individual choice, while also being deeply attached to Afghanistan's cultural and religious traditions. These significant advances in human rights have altered mindsets and changed realities. They will not easily be erased. They are also essential to Afghanistan's future trajectory. For the development and prosperity of any country to be sustainable, people need to live without fear, without discrimination, without repression, and with full respect of their human rights. Moreover, human rights violations undermine the legitimacy of the perpetrators, both vis-à-vis the people and also with respect to regional and international institutions and other states. I strongly urge the Taliban to adopt norms of responsive governance and human rights and to work to re-establish social cohesion and reconciliation, including through respect for the rights of all who have suffered during the decades of conflict. A fundamental red line will be the Taliban's treatment of women and girls and respect for their rights to liberty, freedom of movement, education, self-expression and employment, guided by international human rights norms. In particular, ensuring access to quality secondary education for girls will be an essential indicator of commitment to human rights. Government must remain inclusive, with meaningful participation of women and representation of Afghanistan's diverse communities to help in beginning to build confidence and ensure a future in which all have an equal stake. There should be genuine, inclusive dialogue, including women and including members of Afghanistan's diverse ethnic and religious communities, in order to address the underlying problems that the country faces, the root causes of discrimination, and the enduring legacies of decades of conflict. There should be no reprisals and no sanctions against the thousands of human rights defenders who have contributed to their people's well-being and rights. The mandates, operation, and independence of the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission should be respected. I also urge open access for humanitarian assistance and the protection of all humanitarian personnel. Madam President, I call on all states to create safe pathways for Afghan refugees and migrants, broaden asylum and resettlement programs, and immediately halt the deportation of Afghans who seek protection. Neighboring countries will need additional financial and logistical resources to assist refugees, and all states must be mindful of their obligation to give protection and assistance to those fleeing danger. I also ask states to use their influence with the Taliban to encourage respect for all human rights for all. Islamic majority countries in particular could share their successful experiences of implementing international human rights norms in their cultural and religious context. I urge this Council to take bold and vigorous action, commensurate with the gravity of this crisis, by establishing a dedicated mechanism to closely monitor the evolving human rights situation in Afghanistan, including in particular the Taliban's implementation of its promises with a focus on prevention. I further note that given the urgency of this situation, an update by my office at the coming September session may be necessary. I'm also willing to update the Council intersessionally on an urgent basis in the coming months. United and unequivocal action by Member States will be an important signal to the Taliban that a return to past practices will not find acceptance in the international community, neither now nor in the future. The Afghan people have come too far for such an outcome to ever be tolerable. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Anita Ramasastry, Chair of the Coordination Committee of Special Procedures. Ms. Ramasastry, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, Excellencies, I have the honor to address Your Excellencies today on behalf of the Coordination Committee of Special Procedures. I want to thank the more than 20 mandate holders who contributed inputs to this statement. Many of our colleagues are working tirelessly to assist rights holders in Afghanistan at this critical time. Excellencies, the actions of this Council and member states in these dire moments will set the course for the future of Afghanistan. It is a test case for the integrity of the UN Charter and the meaningful application of human rights and humanitarian norms in crisis. My colleagues and I urge the Council to act with urgency, moral clarity, and with full understanding of its responsibilities to lead the world in defending human rights and the rule of law. To do so, states must not forget how Afghanistan has reached this point and the implications of the past to the present, necessitating the continued and strengthened effort to protect human rights. Afghanistan and its people are facing both short and long-term challenges. In the immediate term, the protection of people most at risk must be ensured. This includes human rights defenders and civil society, journalists, media workers, civil servants, educators, cultural workers, and other categories of individuals, specifically ethnic and religious minorities systematically targeted by the Taliban. Women and girls face particular risks, and large numbers of internally displaced persons are also at risk. Many of these persons are in hiding as the Taliban continues to search homes door to door, and there are serious concerns that such information gathering may lead to them being targeted for reprisals. Searches, arrests, harassments, and intimidation, as well as seizures of property and reprisals, are already being reported. The freedom of movement of people in Afghanistan and the right to be free to leave their country in safety and dignity should be ensured. The pathways to and from the airport require a long and treacherous journey through the city, through Taliban checkpoints without any guarantees of safety or departure. Masses of civilians seeking safety have trekked to the airport, pleading for their lives, a trek that has resulted in death, injury, and traumatization. These harms are reprehensible and inconsistent with the inherent dignity of Afghans and their right to life. International cooperation and action are required to secure the airport. Member states must safeguard the long-term ability for freedom of movement for Afghans, as well as the continuation of civilian flights after evacuations. The Coordination Committee encourages other member states to effectively facilitate the granting of visas, visa waivers, and safe passage to enable Afghans to leave the country to seek safety in third countries, and we welcome the efforts of many states already engaged in supporting exit. Excellencies, we recall the gravity of civilian harms that have been caused by the latest military offensive by the Taliban, noting that the well-founded fears of the Afghan people are rooted in the onslaught of fighting during this offensive, as well as over the course of the last 18 months, and gross and systematic abuses committed from 1996 to 2001. Several mandate holders have reported these concerns over the same period. The international community has witnessed over the course of the last 18 months the deadliest civilian casualties recorded in Afghan in late history. The fifth report of the UN Secretary General on Children in Armed Conflict in Afghanistan reports that child casualties for the first half of 2021 constituted the highest number of children killed and maimed for this period ever recorded by the UN in Afghanistan, a situation compounded in the last few weeks. The devastation of these months has been compounded by the ebb and flow of the Doha peace process, which was heavily invested in by the government, through which there was engagement with civil society and the Afghan people across the country. A hopeful end to decades of armed conflict presented new opportunities to redress the rights of victims of gross violations of human rights, including victims of terrorism, and to embark on a new and peaceful path. In early 2020, however, the agreement between the Taliban and the United States of America and two ceasefires quickly and heinously morphed into unprecedented deaths for Afghan civilians and a weekly count of targeted killings by the Taliban of human rights defenders, women active in public life, media and aid workers, civil society, civil servants, and others. These were indiscriminate attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure, including on hospitals, a maternity ward, academic institutions, markets, and schools. Girls attending school while exercising their right to education and equality were among the majority of those killed. This setback to gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls must be resisted nationally and internationally. It has also resulted in displacement of thousands of families due to military offensives by the Taliban for the control of territory as the peace process was formally in place. 80% of those displaced are women and children. In 2021, another devastating increase in civilian casualties for Afghans was reported, with an increase of 47% as compared to the first half of 2020. The acts of the Taliban over the course of these months and to date may amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. In addition, the brokering of the U.S. Taliban deal with the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan placed the Taliban in a position of strength above its negotiating counterparts in government. The U.S. had very few prerequisites, none of which related to the promotion and protection of the rights of the Afghan people, a reality that may have contributed to the above-mentioned rate of civilian harms. The committee further recalls that in addition to the last 18 months of armed conflict, the Taliban's recent advance on provincial capitals is plagued by human rights violations and grave harm to civilians. In many of these cities, the Taliban have reportedly interrupted cellular service and networks, disrupting freedom of information and freedom of expression, and severely limiting and controlling the information that reaches the international community. Taliban searches of phones, persons, and property are prompting generations of Afghans to delete important documents and online profiles, disrupting their freedom of expression. However, civil society organizations, rights defenders, media workers, and individuals continue to document the Taliban's actions in territories under their control and provide credible and timely reports under grave threat to their safety. This council should make clear that such impingements on freedom of movement and information are unacceptable. Data from areas where the Taliban are in control tend to show that the violations of women's rights remain central to their ideology. These violations include abduction, forced early and child marriage, forced burqa wearing and restrictions on women's attire, restrictions on women's freedom of movement, including the requirement of traveling with the husband or other male relative, exclusion from education and public life, and prohibitions against working outside the home. These rights violations align precisely with those reported by the then Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women in the mandate's first visit to the country in 1999. Authorities must take urgent action to ensure that women and girls are free to leave their homes at any time and for any purpose without fear of violence. All these practices and restrictions that prevent women and girls from leaving their homes amount to de facto deprivation of liberty in violation of international human rights standards. Attempts to claim cultural or religious justifications for such practices should be rejected, noting the inconsistency of such claims with the obligations of international law. In response to the Taliban's most recent offensive and the taking of Kabul, Special Procedures issued a press release joined by 18 mandate holders calling for a swift global action to protect human rights and prevent civilian slaughter, and tracing the path of civilian harm, including for victims of terrorism, that has escalated over the last 18 months to new heights. The experts in another press release underscored the deplorable abandonment of Afghanistan to a fundamentalist group like the Taliban, whose catastrophic human rights record is well documented. Excellencies, fear and hiding are not the full story of what is happening in Afghanistan. Just as quickly as a wave of fear came over Kabul, so too have waves of bravery among Afghans, who, despite unbearable uncertainty, are prepared to participate in building Afghanistan's future, a future that would promote the rights and dignity of every Afghan. Women reporters have shown up to work only to reportedly be turned away. Women human rights defenders and female servants have continued to draw attention to the violations witnessed in all parts of life. On August 19th, Afghans around the country celebrated Afghans' Independence Day, including with women at the forefront. In July, mandate holders jointly warned member states that the situation in Afghanistan was beyond urgent. The experts recalled the statement of the High Commissioner from June, calling for increased monitoring from the Council, as well as consideration of mechanisms for an effective prevention response. Despite the Taliban's promise of a general amnesty, as well as the consideration of some role for women and girls in line with Islamic law, the actions of the armed group have yet to match their rhetoric. Therefore, the committee calls on member states through the Human Rights Council to pursue the resolute promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms of the Afghan people as follows. In the immediate term, member states should remove barriers to exit from Afghanistan, such as lengthy and bureaucratic visa requirements. We also underscore the necessity for cooperation and working together to ensure that those most at risk and their family members are brought to safety, treated with dignity and compassion. The Council should also call on states to take urgent action to reduce risks of exploitation of refugees and internally displaced persons, including trafficking for sexual and labor exploitation, through the urgent expansion of humanitarian admission, resettlement, and family reunification schemes. Member states should ensure that a humanitarian corridor is established from Kabul to and from the airport immediately. The current state of chaos is inhumane and can be overcome through concrete mechanisms for cooperation, including cooperation on securing the civilian airport and the continuation of civilian flights after evacuations. The Council should establish an independent and adequately resourced international human rights oversight accountability mechanism for a minimum of 2 years to be deployed urgently to Afghanistan to assess the situation on the ground and report back to the Council, including but not limited to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. A fact-finding mechanism is the minimum required to achieve a credible outcome of the special session. The Council should mandate the High Commissioner to regularly report to the Council, ensure that special procedures can continue their independent work, support the implementation of the standing invitation to special procedures for country visits when appropriate, and support previous recommendations of official visits to Afghanistan. The Council should call for the continuation of the robust functioning of Afghanistan's Independent Human Rights Commission and the safety and security of their staff to allow it to carry out its legitimate work in monitoring the human rights situation in Afghanistan. And member states should support efforts to reach a negotiated settlement of the conflict through an inclusive peace process that guarantees the meaningful and equal participation of the Afghan people in the promotion and protection of human rights and freedoms, including non-discrimination, enshrined in the Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. In addition, and finally, we underscore the following. Member states should stand firm in their commitments to women, peace, and security. In addition to supporting women's meaningful participation in negotiating any peaceful settlement, this also requires the promotion and protection of their human rights, including the right to participate in public, cultural, and political life and in education. It also requires concrete measures to ensure their safety and prevent gross violations linked to any restrictions imposed on their access to sexual and reproductive health rights. The Council must ensure that the protection of the rights of the child are also prioritized to prevent grave violations against children from occurring in the armed conflict. The Council should address the protection needs of human rights defenders, including women's civil society. The international community has partnered with Afghan civil society and human rights defenders and must honor these commitments through continued financial and political investment. Member states should ensure that transnational businesses operating in Afghanistan and international financial institutions that provide support for development projects should ensure continued respect for human rights throughout their operations and for their employees and other rights holders impacted by their operations. And the Council should address the need to protect the full diversity of the cultural heritage of Afghanistan as required by international law, as well as cultural institutions, cultural workers, and artists. In closing, we reiterate the call for special procedures amidst the fall of Kabul. Quote, "We cannot stand idly by as the lives of the Afghan people are treated with contempt, derision, and weariness. Afghanistan is a test case for the value of the UN Charter and the commitment of states to prevent the scourge of terrorism from destroying rights-bearing societies and values. We urge all states to stand firm and have the moral courage to act in order to prevent further violence and harms. The international community will be judged by our actions, our fortitude, and our willingness to make our words about rights have meaning in this decisive moment." Thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to Ms. Shahrzad Akbar, Chairperson of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. Ms. Akbar, you have the floor on Zoom.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address a special session of the Council on Afghanistan. I and many Afghans and the friends and allies of the Afghan people have been talking about the urgent need for the Human Rights Council to respond to the situation in Afghanistan for months. In May, following the horrendous attack on the girls' school in Kabul that killed over 85 people, Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission called on the UN and the international community to move beyond statements to action to save the lives of Afghans and prevent further atrocities. Specifically, we called for a fact-finding mission to monitor and report, gather evidence of violations and abuses, and advance accountability. As millions of Afghans are suffering, the future of the country remains uncertain. Fundamental rights of women and girls are being repressed in every village, town, and city across Afghanistan. Hundreds of thousands are fleeing the country, particularly ethnic minorities, human rights defenders, journalists, worried about the Taliban prosecution and repression. The least the special session can do is to illustrate through actions to Afghans that they will not look away, that the world is committed to at least a credible, strong, and well-resourced mechanism to document the abuses and act as a deterrent. Madam President, the draft resolution tabled today is a travesty. We have documented that the Taliban advances came with summary executions, disappearances, restrictions on women, media, and cultural life. This is not ancient history. This is earlier this month, and this is today. Women in Afghanistan are being turned down from their offices by the Taliban. Universities have been asked to discuss gender segregation possibilities. Women are required to be accompanied by male members of their family in public. Media are not broadcasting music. Journalists and activists are in hiding or in flee. Former members of the Afghan National Security Forces are scared of the worst, the summary executions. House-to-house searches and information gathering has led to widespread fear. People accused of theft or other crimes are being punished in ways that undermine their human dignity without due process. Additionally, as this Council knows, for the past 20 years and even before, Afghanistan has been the site of many war crimes. Hospitals and newborn babies have been attacked, school children blown up, media have been directly targeted, innocent civilians have been killed in airstrikes or illegally detained and tortured in night raids. The response of this Council to these abuses as the foremost international human rights body cannot be business as usual. Afghan activists on the ground, my colleagues on the ground, who face direct threats to their lives and the lives of their families, demand better, while they have everything to lose by putting this ask for a better mechanism forward. To be frank with you, you are failing them. But now, today, not next month, not next March, you have the chance to redeem yourselves. Please take it. Please ensure the session has a credible and strong outcome. Please do not leave this tomorrow or the next month. Many I speak to you in Afghanistan already fear that they may not have a tomorrow. In our worst moments, we call on you to do better. Thank you.
I thank you for your statement. I wish to advise delegations that Ukraine has also expressed support this morning for the call for the special session. It did so prior to the 10 a.m. deadline. We will now hear from the country concerned, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Afghanistan. You have 5 minutes. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Yes. Thank you very much, Madam President, Madam High Commissioner, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to the OIC Group and our coordinator for their support for co-convening of this timely special session. I also would like to thank the wider membership of the Human Rights Council and the observer states who joined in great numbers, stating their support for this special session. Colleagues, we started this session with a heavy heart and deep concerns about what future holds for Afghanistan and the region. The current situation in the country and its recent developments are critical and requires your utmost attention and action. Millions fearing for their lives, and a humanitarian crisis is unfolding as we speak. The people of Afghanistan, in particular, the thousands of human rights defenders, journalists, academics, professionals, civil society members, and former security personnel who were the backbone, and we hope still will be, of a contemporary and democratic society, and whose lives and livelihoods are at risk. The millions of Afghan girls and women who have currently lost their access to education, freedom to work, and participate in the political and social life of their country. Over 4 million internally displaced people who currently live with little to no humanitarian support. And many more Afghans who are fearful of their lives and their future. They deserve your full support here at this Council, at least your moral support. Because, ladies and gentlemen, on many other forums and platforms, the Afghans were told that the conflict in Afghanistan does not have a military solution. They were told that the just and enduring peace will come through negotiating tables in the luxury hotels of the region. They were told that their rights, their dignity, and their dreams for a better future will not be traded. Alas, the dire predicaments of the Afghans today, from the gut-wrenching incidents at the Kabul airport to atrocities in the plains of Spinbolak in Kandahar, and the displaced people and the besieged valleys of the Hindu Kush, tell us a different story, that there could be military solution, even if short-lived, that the civilized and rule-bound communities could be abandoned overnight, and that atrocities could not be condemned and could be forgotten. Madam President, the situation on the ground is uncertain and dire. It requires serious attention, responsibility, and accountability. We witness a high number of serious violations of international humanitarian law and human rights abuses which are documented, and most of those gruesome videos are available online. While some Taliban were and are still talking differently, restrictions and violations are already taking place as we speak. Women's rights in particular, including incidents of forced marriage, restriction on freedom of movement, access to education and workplace. Media outlets are being intimidated and controlled, and in some cases, door-to-door searches are being carried, examples of which was reported last week to the UN. Civil society activists, women's rights defenders, journalists, and many more fear retribution and setback for their works and accomplishments in the past 20 years. The international community, in particular this Council, call upon the Taliban and all parties to respect international human rights law and international humanitarian law and ensure the safety and security of all Afghans. Madam President, Madam High Commissioner, beside the protection, this is a key moment for the Human Rights Council to embrace the preventive role that it has many times spoken about. Dear colleagues, due to whatever excuses, this session may fall short of establishing a fact-finding mission as we requested, to look into the past violations and abuses, help accountability and justice for all, and to prevent future atrocities. We still hope, and we urge you, that the outcome of this session delivers a strong message to all parties, including the Taliban, that abuses and violation of human rights law and international humanitarian law undermines both peace and justice and will have consequences. Many of you may have seen devastating images from Kabul airport. This utter desperation for a way out of Afghanistan conveys a sense of fear and uncertainty many Afghans feel. We call upon all states to keep their borders open, to facilitate the exit and provide access for all Afghans, for the ones who are most at risk and who wish to leave. Seeking asylum is a human right, and we urge you to welcome all those in need. Madam President, ambassadors, and whosoever listens to me at this moment around the world. As an engaged and concerned citizen of Afghanistan, and as a student of history of my country, let me end my statement by reminding all of us that the main lesson from the past 100 years of our history is that a durable peace and a sustainable state in a multi-ethnic and diverse Afghanistan requires a practical and endogenous political structure, a governance, a polity insusceptible to authoritarianism and the dictatorship of any type or manifestation. Hence, there is no alternative to the establishment of a right-based, pluralistic, broad-based government that includes all ethnic groups and women representatives in an open manner. While some states have adopted the policy of wait and see, the human rights system cannot and should not wait and see. We need attention and action for this. We urge you to remain fully engaged and abreast of the situation in Afghanistan, and I thank you very much, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement. I will now turn to the list of speakers. Allow me to recall that the established time limits of 2 minutes and 30 seconds for Council members and 1 minute and 30 seconds for observers. The list of speakers will close in 15 minutes. I will start with the list of speakers for Member States of the Council, and I give the floor to His Excellency, the State Secretary, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, on behalf of the European Union by video statement.
I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union. Recent developments in Afghanistan threaten to reverse the political, economic and social achievements of the Afghan people over the last 2 decades, in particular in the field of human rights of women and girls, children, persons in vulnerable situations and persons belonging to minorities. The EU calls for immediate restoration of security and civil order and a return to constitutional rule and the protection and respect for civilian life, dignity and property throughout Afghanistan, whereby we stress each state's responsibility to protect its population. We are deeply concerned over the reports of serious violations of international humanitarian law and human rights violations and abuses. We are particularly concerned about Afghan women. As all Afghan people, they are entitled to enjoy all human rights and deserve to live in safety, security and dignity, and their voices must be heard. The EU urges those in positions of power and authority across Afghanistan to guarantee their protection. Accountability for serious human rights violations and abuses and international humanitarian law violations must be ensured. We recall that Afghanistan is a state party to the ICC. The EU attaches the utmost importance to the safety and security of all Afghans, including local staff working for the EU or EU member states and international organizations, as well as of those working for local civil society organizations providing aid. The EU is determined to do all that is in its capacity to help those endangered by the dramatic crisis in Afghanistan. We also stress the need that the EU can continue its important work in Afghanistan. Only an inclusive, comprehensive and enduring political solutions through meaningful negotiations and respecting international law will bring sustainable peace to Afghanistan. Women must be empowered and enabled to participate to this process in a full, equal and meaningful manner.
Thank you. I now give the floor to His Excellency, the Minister
you.